Chelsea is this ultra posh area of London, luxury homes, high-end restaurants, snooty boutiques, think Rodeo Drive, but super British, so somehow even worse. So then you think, what the fuck was the Vatican doing investing 350 million euros to develop luxury apartments in Chelsea? When I think about how any church should spend its money, I'm thinking homeless shelters and soup kitchens, not homes for the ultra-rich. But here's the thing. It's strange how not strange that is for the Catholic Church. In 2022, the Vatican's budget showed that it expected to receive $877 million of income. 65% of that came from sources like real estate management and commercial investments. But donations, you know how most churches get their money, only make up like 30% of the Catholic Church's budget.
If you'd like to earn CPE credit for listening to this episode, visit earmarkcpe.com. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Continuing education has never been so easy. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, and welcome to Oh My Fraud, a true crime podcast where our criminals don't buy indulgences, they sell indulgences and skim a little off the top. I'm Greg Kyte.
And I'm Father Caleb.
Well, welcome, Father Caleb.
Peace be with you,
May you allow me the indulgence to read a listener email real quick?
Proceed, my son.
And blessings upon you. Listener Nick wrote us, and he said, I just wanted to write a quick note to tell you how much I appreciate the podcast. I'm a CPA, and it's really helpful to hear so many examples of internal controls being ignored or opportunities for people in trusted positions to attempt fraud. At this point, I'm not even listening for the CPE. It's just really enjoyable.
Man, Nick really nailed it. Lack of internal controls and people abusing their position of trust have become two of the main themes of this show.
Right. That's almost a tagline for Oh My Fraud.
Yeah, right. If you like it when people abuse their positions of trust or when companies lack internal controls, and honestly, who doesn't?
Who doesn't?
Take a minute to write us a review. Who knows? We might even read yours on the show.
Also, if your firm is looking for in-house ethics or fraud training that doesn't suck, we do that. We also do keynote addresses at events and conferences, and don't worry, we're pros. We can work clean, you know, if you want us to.
Yeah, if you like it clean.
If you do, we good.
So, if you want more information on pricing and availability, send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com.
Awesome. So, Caleb,
yes,
back to Nick's email that we just read.
Yes.
When I think of notable organizations that have multiple examples of people who have abused their positions of trust, the Catholic Church definitely comes to mind. Arguably hard to find an organization that could top it in terms of examples of abusing positions of trust.
Yeah, I got nothing for you, Greg.
You've said before on shows you're Catholic adjacent.
I'm Catholic adjacent. I've been Catholic adjacent for let's see, a dozen years or so now.
Right.
And you know, it's
because your wife.
I married a Catholic. Yeah, I married a Catholic, and she's super Catholic. Like it isn't like one of those kind of like, you know, your average kind of like cafeteria Catholics. She's like, okay. She has an uncle who has passed. He was a priest. She has an aunt who is a nun, who's actually a very lovely woman, and who actually texted me on my birthday, which was just yesterday, as of this recording.
This
lady is so sweet. Like she stays with us when she visits.
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, she's amazing.
Yeah.
So and you know, on the big holidays, Easter and Christmas, like we definitely go to mass and with the kids and my wife's sister's family and stuff. So a lot of Catholic going on in the last decade or so of my life. And we were married in the church, which I wasn't necessarily crazy about, but you know, it was just one of those things you do,
Yeah, sure. Well, but I think
yeah.
like the stories about your aunt, your wife's aunt, who's the
Yes.
nun, who's
Yes.
just a lovely person. I think that actually underscores something that probably not a bad idea to address right off the bat is
Yep.
that we are 100% aware of the fact, just like, Enron was a horrible scandal, but
Yes.
the rank and file people at Enron, I'm sure, were wonderful, nice people,
Regular people.
that didn't do a goddamn thing wrong.
That's right. Yes.
And same thing with the Catholic Church. These are people who've dedicated their lives to the service of to be the love of Christ to the people around them. And
Yeah.
and I'd say most people who do that, they do a pretty damn good job of being that. So when we talk about scandal, and that's one of the things that I think makes religious scandals so notable and so memorable, is that you're like going, ooh, even there you can get some bad actors.
Well, I'll tell you that the priest that married us, who is a lovely man, he and who we were very fond of, are still very fond of. When we would have conversations with him about that, and I think this is probably the standard line for priests, but he's just like the church is made up of people, and people are imperfect.
Yeah.
People make mistakes. And I'm sure there's lots of priests out there that who basically that's their explanation for, like you say, people abusing their positions of power and trust. And I think it's tough because it's just one of those things where, yes, that's true, and it has happened repeatedly, which suggests that there is something greater than just flawed people making bad decisions. And like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be so euphemistic, but like abusing people, right? Or whatever kind of form of like bad behavior it takes. Yeah. But there's something about the system that is allowing people to do these things that they shouldn't be doing, abusing their power and their positions of trust. And it was happening repeatedly for decades. Yeah. And I don't know, that is hard to explain away with, well, there's just a few bad apples.
Okay. So also, and I'm picking up what you're putting down, because also maybe at the top we should also say, by no means take our comments in any way as an excuse for some of the truly reprehensible behavior that has, because when you talk about scandals and attempted cover-ups of scandals, that is just objectively some bad,
terrible.
You just can't label it anything other than
abjectly terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
The worst.
So if you haven't figured it out yet, today's episode is all about the Catholic Church and what the Italian media has dubbed the Catholic Church's, quote, trial of the century.
It's probably premature, only 24 years into the century, to call something the Catholic Church's trial of the century, especially considering the Catholic Church's proclivity for doing, how do we say this delicately, some fucked up shit.
Unfortunately, the Catholic Church is no stranger to fraud. One specific type of fraud that I just learned about, Caleb, is, and this is, I believe this is specific to the Catholic Church, although it's probably does have broader reach, but it's called simony. That's where someone is appointed to a church office in a corrupt fashion.
There's a word for that exact thing.
There is, yeah, and it
Fantastic.
comes from even if you look at the what do they call it, the etymology of the word?
Yes,
it's some deep cut about somebody in the Bible named Simon who did something wrong that they
Simon Peter, like Jesus'
no, not that one.
Best buddy.
Different. There's so many Simons in the Bible.
There's a lot of Simons.
You gotta really dig for this Simon.
There's a lot of Simons.
So there are, but It's called simony. So here's some examples of simony. So let's say a priest were to pay a bribe to become a bishop. Boom.
Okay.
That's simony. Or let's say if Pope Nicholas III were to have distributed papal states nepotistically among members of his own family, giving them land and power, resulting in Pope Nicholas III being put on blast in Canto 19 of Dante's Inferno, that is also simony.
Did that really happen?
That really did happen.
Yeah.
that absolutely happened.
That's fantastic.
Which is actually kind of awesome too. Have you ever read Dante's Inferno?
No, I haven't.
Neither have I.
Okay.
Nor have I read what Divine Comedy. I haven't read either of those.
Oh, right. Yes.
I believe I own both of them, but they're a little bit intimidating for dumb Greg to get through. But I do think it's kind of cool that he used his books to actually talk shit about real people.
I think it's fantastic
in his works of literature. But
and let me just say, I think Greg, for the second half of the century of your life, maybe you should go back and get a classics major. I'm just throwing that out there.
It's so funny. That was one of the majors that was interesting to me when I was before I chose math. So that happened. But here's another fun fact, Caleb. I personally find it delightful that someone who commits the act of simony is called a simoniac, which does in fact make simoniac the oh my fraud word of the day. Try to use simoniac casually among your colleagues at work. If you're successful, you will be able to sit alone at lunch for the rest of the year, completely undisturbed, because no one will want to be your friend anymore. What's that word?
Simoniac.
Boom. Historically, in the Catholic Church, there has also been plenty of embezzlement. We found one study that identified 5 common modern-day fraud schemes employed by what they referred to as, quote, priestly fraudsters, another great title given to people. Here's the list of the five common fraud schemes. Taking cash directly from the weekly collection box. Boom. Okay. Makes sense. Yep. 2, sure. Diverting checks payable to the parish into one's personal accounts. Makes sense.
Why not?
3rd, improper reimbursement of personal expenses. These really are making a lot of sense. 4, using secret bank accounts in the church's name as a slush fund. Kind of has a little Rita Crundwell of Dixon, Illinois vibe on that one. Yeah. And 5, coercing vulnerable elderly parishioners, primarily widowed females, to give money to the parish or directly to the priest under false pretenses. Making Jesus proud by stealing from widows and orphans. It's all right there.
Classic.
And the study goes on to say this, and I think this was an interesting observation that they made. They said Catholic priests would seem to have a strong ability to commit fraud. They command local positions of unchallenged authority over cash-generating operations with weak internal controls. Sounds familiar. Again, the catchphrase for the podcast. And for many, priests also exist as citizens above suspicion for misdeeds such as fraud.
Here are a few more fun facts. According to Catholics, the Catholic Church started with Jesus, and the first pope was the Apostle Peter. According to scholars, who are for sure going to hell, the Catholic Church started 600 years after Jesus, and the first pope was Pope Gregory the Great. Nice name, by the way.
One of my favorite popes, honestly.
As you remember from your first period World Civ class from your junior year of high school, the Catholic Church got a huge bump in popularity in 313 AD when the Roman Emperor Constantine converted and finally made it legal to be a Christian. It made the pitch easier to new converts. You get to go to heaven, and now you don't even have to die in the Colosseum first. Just to be clear, Constantine didn't make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire, but his conversion arguably made Christianity cool. Kind of like what Tom Cruise did for Scientology.
I think it's got to be comparable.
Totally. Similar abs, right? Jesus, Tom Cruise.
Constantine was...
Oh, Constantine. Sorry.
Ripped.
Right.
He was a gym rat.
Right.
Everybody knows that.
Classic Roman.
It was like, tell me 2 facts about Constantine. He converted to Christianity, and leg day was his jam.
Another thing to keep in mind is that Catholicism isn't just a religion, it's also a country. Vatican City became an independent country in 1929. It is not a member of the United Nations, but it is a permanent observer state of the United Nations, whatever the fuck that means. In 1960,
no one knows.
Not
Not even the United Nations knows. They're like, well, we have a seat here that says United Nations on it, but
yeah,
they just get to come. They just get to come to the after.
They don't get a microphone, but they do get a good view of the action.
No microphone, no translator headphones. They just get to be bored for a long time.
You know, those translator headphones, those look like they were from like about 300 AD.
Right. Yeah. Well, Constantine developed those.
Oh,
that's the third interesting fact about Constantine.
That is. Okay.
He was a real regular at Radio Shack.
In 1964, the Vatican refused full membership in the United Nations in order to preserve its neutrality in political issues. It's also interesting to note that Vatican City is not recognized by the International Olympic Committee, which makes sense because A, it only has about 800 citizens, most of whom are over the age of 60, and B, it wouldn't be fair. You can't compete in swimming against a country whose leader can turn all of lane 3 into holy water and can miraculously heal any of their athletes' injuries.
Yeah, it seems like an unfair advantage if your athletic team has a direct line to God.
Right. In 2014, the 3 most powerful people in Vatican City were Pope Francis, of course, because he's the fucking Pope, then the Vatican Secretary of State, who basically acts as the Prime Minister of the Vatican, and the 3rd most powerful person in 2014 was Archbishop Giovanni Angelo Becciu.
Becciu.
Did I say that right?
Becciu.
Becciu.
I bet you can't pronounce his name right.
I bet you right. He was like the Vice Secretary of State, or more precisely, the Substitutu apud Vaticanum Secretarium Civitatis.
Right. And if you think that Caleb pronounced that wrong, you're wrong because it's a dead language, so we can pronounce it however we want to at this point.
In 2018, Archbishop Becciu was promoted from Substitutu to Cardinal. Specifically, he became the Cardinal of the Prefect of the blah blah of the Latin words of important Catholic shit. It was a big damn deal. Cardinal Becciu was a big damn deal for about 9 months. Then he was a big damn problem.
In 2019, the Vatican financial authorities received a complaint about the Vatican's Secretary of State, specifically that the Secretary of State was putting a bunch of pressure on the Vatican's bank to refinance a shitty mortgage on a depressed property that was owned by the Vatican. I mean, the property was mostly kind of entirely owned by the Vatican, but we'll get to that in a second.
This seems like a weird problem.
It is, and it gets weirder.
Okay.
The property in question was a 49-unit luxury apartment development called 60 Sloane in the exclusive Chelsea area of London. Now, just to be clear, there wasn't a problem that the Vatican had invested in luxury apartments in a very expensive part of London. It definitely doesn't feel like a Mother Teresa kind of financial move, but it's not unethical or illegal either. In fact, it's estimated that about 2/3 of the Catholic Church's annual income is derived from real estate and commercial investments. So really, investments like this are commonplace for the Catholic Church.
All right. If you say so.
And what does that make you feel like? The Catholic Church is just a what? Real estate investment trust. It's a real estate investment trust.
Wait, are you telling me that the Catholic Church is basically just a big real estate investment trust?
It is. Most people don't know it, with
a very weird dress code.
Yeah. Where it's It's a real estate investment trust where everybody gets to wear dresses, and really what they're looking for more than like your tithes and offerings is for you to sign up for a reverse mortgage on your home. It's
fabulous.
It's their way. The Vatican first invested in the 60 Sloane Project in 2014 when Archbishop Becciu was the sostituto. The Vatican paid 160 million euros for a 45% stake in the project. Then, fast forward to 2019, 5 years later, the Vatican paid an additional 190 million euros to gain full control of the project. 150 million of that came from a high interest rate mortgage on the property. That's why the Vatican's Secretary of State was pressuring the Vatican's bank to refinance the mortgage, because they wanted a more favorable interest rate.
Well, that makes sense.
Makes sense to me too. Why would you want to pay a huge interest rate, even if you've got all of God's money? You still want to save a little bit on interest.
Right.
But like I said before, when the Vatican's bank was doing their due diligence on this loan, probably the equivalent of like a title policy search,
sure,
they found that the Vatican only kind of owned the 60 Sloane Project, even after paying this additional 190 million euros for it. And that's because of a gentleman.
Are you going to tell us why they only kind of owned it?
Yeah. It's because of this gentleman named Gianluigi Torzi. Everyone in this episode has the most Italian names of Italian names.
I don't think it gets more Italian than that.
Yeah,
I honestly don't. Like he could be fucking Chef Boyardee, but like that is like that's as Italian as it gets. My God,
Gianluigi Torzi, and this guy, Mr. Torzi, had balls that were as big as his scruples were non-existent. And let me explain.
Okay, please.
Gianluigi Torzi was hired by the Vatican as a middleman to buy out the other investors in the 60 Sloane Project.
Okay.
The transaction was supposed to go down like this. The Vatican would give Torzi its shares in 60 Sloane. Then the Vatican would also give Torzi the 190 million euros to buy out all the other investors. And then once Torzi had all of the shares for the project, he would then give them back to the Vatican, at which time the Vatican would own the entire project. Very complex. It seems unnecessarily complex, but that's because the ownership structure of this 60 Sloane Project, it was ridiculously complex, where there was like a shell company that owned another shell company that owned another shell company that owned another shell company that actually owned the real estate. So
you read my mind. Like, this seems superfluously complex.
Yeah. Which again, and none of the research indicated that complexity of ownership was the motivation for the complexity of the ownership was for fraud. There was just no explanation given for the ridiculously complex ownership structure of the. But that's part of what the Catholic Church was trying to do. Is they were trying to get rid of. They just wanted to own the building. Vatican owns building, and so Gianluigi Torzi was supposed to do that. But what really happened, what Gianluigi Torzi really did, is he used the Vatican's money to buy out the other investors, and then when Torzi had all the shares in the 60 Sloane Project, he restructured the entire business entity, and in doing so, he created this small class of voting shares that controlled the entire project. So Torzi then gave all of the general shares to the Vatican, but he kept all the voting shares for himself. So all of the ownership did go to the Vatican, but all of the control stayed with Torzi. So
who owns the property?
The Vatican.
Right. No.
But who gets to make decisions on the property?
Who controls the property?
Torzi. So then an act of incomprehensible ballsiness, Torsey began to extort the Vatican for millions of euros just so that they could have control of the project that they just bought.
Wow.
Amazing.
Impressive.
Amazing. And I just have to say, who does that? Who in the world would extort the organization that was behind the Crusades? That's you are an idiot, sir. And sure, the Catholic Church can send you to hell, but I've watched enough gangster movies to know that the Catholic Church is pretty well connected. So I would think that if you tried to extort the Catholic Church, then even the Holy Ghost would have a hard time finding your body after that happened. That's the level of connection that the Roman Catholic Church has.
That's who you're messing with, my friend.
Yeah, like, did you see Goodfellas?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean,
I've maybe seen Goodfellas more than any other movie that's ever been made.
Right. Yeah, and so the church would go to Torsey and say, "What, do I look like a clown to you?" And he'd probably say, "Well, actually, in those robes, you kind of do." And then it'd just go downhill from there.
Right. Well, then Torsey would walk into that room and get shot in the face.
Right. And then they put him in a trunk and they drive him in the middle of the night somewhere and bury him in a, you've seen the movie.
I've seen the movie.
So, regardless of all of this hullabaloo with Torsey, the Vatican eventually gained full control and full ownership of the 60 Sloan project, a project which later was sold for a loss of 140 million euros. Torsey was later arrested on a host of charges, including extortion and aggravated fraud, which is worse than regular fraud because you're defrauding
really
people,
going for it.
You're very upset about it. As a result, this entire 60 Sloan transaction was scrutinized, and in doing so, it came to light that the person behind the Vatican's original investment in 60 Sloan was Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Becciu.
Thanks to Torsey, the 60 Sloan project clearly became a clusterfuck. But it didn't start that way, right? Wrong. The Vatican didn't invest directly into 60 Sloan. It invested into a fund that owned 60 Sloan. The guy who managed the fund, as fund managers do, charged the Vatican a 2% annual management fee plus a 20% fee on profits, incentive fee. And once the fund could boast that the Catholic Church bought a 45% stake in the project, its share price soared.
Right,
resulting
if God wants to buy in your project, then why wouldn't you want to buy into this project?
Right. Yeah. Get on board.
Yeah.
Its share price soared, resulting in massive profits, at least on paper, but even paper profits were subject to the 20% fee. The fund manager also reportedly booked a 128 million euro profit on the 60 Sloan project when the Vatican eventually bought out the fund. Like we said, Cardinal Becciu was the person green-lighting the Vatican's investment in 60 Sloan. But it turned out to be such a horrible investment, the Vatican decided to take a closer look at all transactions associated with Becciu. One such transaction that came up was the transfer of 125,000 euros to a charity run by Becciu's brother in Sardinia. Becciu said that his brother requested the money to build a bakery to employ at-risk youth.
Sounds like something that the Catholic Church would be interested in.
Sure. Why not? The court conceded that the 125,000 euros was sent to a valid charity, but nevertheless ruled that it was embezzlement because Becciu essentially sent the Vatican's money to his brother.
Right. That's kind of...
It's a related party, Greg.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is. Yeah. Hard to say that that's not your independence is impaired.
There's a conflict of interest there.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I like to think of it as an independence thing. If he's trying to find great charities that the Vatican should invest its money in, he goes, "Oh, my my flunky brother here. I'm Cardinal Becciu. He's at best junior priest Becciu, and he's starting this bakery. So yeah, I'll send my flunky brother a bone, a 125,000 euro bone to get his bakery up and running.
Yeah, so he can make some baguettes.
Right. It's definitely, it's at best sketchy.
Another suspicious transaction was the payment of 575,000 euros to a British security firm. The firm was supposed to use the money to negotiate the release of a nun who was taken hostage by Islamic militants linked to Al-Qaeda. But the money wasn't sent to a British security firm. It was sent to a woman named Cecilia Marogna. Did I say that right?
Marogna.
Cecilia Marogna from Sardinia. Did we mention Cardinal Becciu was from Sardinia? Apparently, Marogna was indeed an expert in international geopolitics, but she did not use the funds to negotiate the release of any nuns. She spent the money on high-end vacations and luxury shopping sprees.
So all of this, the Torsey stuff, the fund manager stuff, the woman of international geopolitics who maybe wasn't so much a woman of international geopolitics, all of this resulted in a 2.5-year trial, and it was the first time a Catholic cardinal, specifically Cardinal Becciu, has ever been prosecuted in the Vatican's criminal court. Wow. As a result of the trial, the following people got charged with the following crimes and sentenced to the following punishments. Gianluigi Torsey, he was convicted of several crimes, including, unsurprisingly, extortion, and he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. That fund manager who managed the 60 Sloan Fund, he was convicted of embezzlement and money laundering and sentenced to 5.5 years in prison. Cecilia Marogna, the lady who didn't save any nuns, she was found guilty of embezzlement and sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. And lastly, Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Becciu was found guilty of multiple counts of embezzlement and multiple counts of fraud. He was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison, and he was ordered to pay a fine of 8,000 euros. Yeah, not 8 million euros.
Strange amount.
8,000 euros. But for someone who's taken a vow of poverty, that's a lot of euros. And
fair.
Becciu was also barred from ever holding public office in the future.
Public office?
Yeah. So he can't become, I guess, president of the Vatican. I don't know what, because it's just, I think public office, right? The Vatican court can't bar him from public office in any country that's not Vatican City.
The Vatican.
So it's like you can't be a dog
catcher. So he
catcher.
can be mayor of Rome.
You can't be Pope. Yeah.
But he can't be Pope.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
right.
And speaking of which, despite the results of the trial, everyone, including Cardinal Becciu, maintains their innocence, and everyone, including Cardinal Becciu, plans on appealing their decisions. This is what the financial.
What year did the convictions come down?
2023 just happened.
All right.
So the Financial Times said Cardinal Becciu denies any wrongdoing. A lawyer acting for Becciu said his client was in no way responsible for any losses suffered by the Vatican, and that the cardinal had relied on the expert opinions of others when investments were made. At one point, Becciu was considered a possible future candidate for the papacy, but any hopes Becciu once had to eventually become pope are now a distant memory.
So, Greg, did we humble ourselves before God
and learn the lesson that He's trying to impute unto us?
Yeah.
I want to say yes, but the real answer is no. But we got a very valuable reminder of lessons that we've seen repeatedly in other cases in this podcast. And the big takeaway I take from this is that no one should be beyond scrutiny. Like that report said, the one that we talked about at the top of the episode, many people think that priests exist as citizens above suspicions for misdeeds such as fraud, but clearly they don't, because we just saw a cardinal who was convicted of fraud. So cardinals are not above suspicion for fraud. Clearly priests aren't above suspicion for fraud. As of this recording, there are 236 cardinals in the Catholic Church, any of whom could commit fraud. Now, hopefully none of them do, but any of them could commit fraud. And you don't have to have religious skepticism in order to have professional skepticism about religious organizations' finances. Everyone who's an accountant has to stop trusting people. Okay, Caleb, that's really the takeaway. That's what
Just
the
accountants?
Lord, that's what the Lord is trying to teach us: is stop trusting people. If you're trusting people, you're not doing God's will.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Greg.
Tell me some people you trust, Caleb.
Tell me some people.
Who do you trust? That's the right answer.
Oh,
exactly.
okay.
You nailed it.
Great.
What about you, Caleb? Anything you came away with?
Well, I think for me it's the same. I think it's the same as, which is, I think you said it on a past episode where, I maybe didn't see, you maybe wouldn't see this coming, but you shouldn't be surprised, right?
Right.
Like, I think that's a nice way to kind of to explain the nuance. Whereas anyone's possible of anything given any set of given a particular set of circumstances. And in this case, you have someone high up in the Catholic Church who, for whatever reason, invested in a project and then got extorted the shit out of it, ended up getting the church extorted, and there's embezzlement, all kinds of money moving around that isn't going to anything. And it's just, sure. Like when there's that much money sloshing around, like, it just feels like anything's possible,
Yeah, for sure.
And again, when you've got people in positions of power and people in positions of influence, they probably feel like it's fine.
Right. Well, and again, I mean, going back even to Nick's email that he sent us that we talked about at the top of the podcast, you've got people. There's the whole concept of management override of controls.
Yep.
And when you are the third most important person in an entire government of the smallest country on the planet that, like you said, has large coffers, there's a lot of management override of controls that you can do that. You can override the controls. And this didn't play directly into this story, but at one point there was an audit that was supposed to happen of the entire finances of Vatican City, and Cardinal Becciu himself unilaterally was just like, "Yeah, I'm canceling the audit."
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, right. He just did that.
Yeah,
and apparently he did. It was like he did it, and everybody was like, "Oh, Becciu says the audit's canceled, so I guess it's and then later, upon further scrutiny, it was like, does he have the authority to cancel an audit? And people were like, I don't think he had the authority to cancel the audit, but he still did. Yeah, he still did it. That was kind of the murmurings behind the scene. But you got somebody who can just say, hey, you're trying to look into whether I'm doing things in a untoward fashion, knock it off. And they just go, yes, your holiness, and walk away.
Well, so that's what I was just kind of thinking about was, in any organization, monitoring is a critical internal control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, if you are part of an organization that regularly says that you only answer to God, then that monitoring is, it's kind of squishy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, I'll answer to God.
Right.
You're just like, yeah, but that means you get to steal until you get to answer?
Yeah. Yikes.
That seems
wrong.
One of the commandments, right?
Right.
Right.
But yeah, but like, are you trying to say that they're like, you could throw me in jail, but I'm really answering to someone who could throw me into the lake of fire?
Yes, the lake of fire.
So you got to try. So there's more at stake to this than your dumb audit. So you can just trust me and go away that I'm going to do this.
What are millions of dollars when you are burning for all eternity?
Yeah. Another, I don't know if this caught your eye though. One of the things I think that was unique about this specific case was that Cardinal Becciu, from everything that we read and saw with the research, he never benefited directly from any of his embezzlements or frauds. It was, he signed up for a crappy investment where the fund manager made a lot of money, and he hired Gianluigi Torzi, who in turn extorted the Catholic Church,
double-crossed him.
But Cardinal Becciu didn't get his pocket line by that either, but he was instrumental in having that guy do that thing to that screwed the Catholic Church. And then he sent the $125,000 to his brother, not to him. I mean, maybe his brother had him over for a really nice Thanksgiving dinner, because little known fact, they also celebrate Thanksgiving in Sardinia, just so that they don't.
No?
No, it's not. But you know what I'm saying.
I do.
He might have tangentially benefited from his brother opening a bakery. Maybe he got like you said, a couple of nice baguettes out of the deal.
Yeah, made his mother happy.
And I don't think Cecilia Maronia took him on her shopping spree or on her vacations. So even though the dude he's and again, he's appealing it, so who knows if he'll actually go to jail, or if once the sentence is there, if he'll really spend much time at all actually serving that sentence. But he is supposed to spend 5.5 years in jail for crimes that he never directly benefited from. Weird. All right, well, that's it for this episode. Remember, if you're going to steal from the Catholic Church, make sure your right hand doesn't know what your left hand is doing, just in case your right hand gets subpoenaed.
And also remember, this is the only scandal ever to involve the Catholic Church.
If you want to drop us a line, send us an email at ohmyfraud@earmarkcpe.com. Caleb, if people just want to get a hold of you, but they can't stand me, how can they do that?
They can find me on LinkedIn /Caleb Newquist. Greg, if they just like you a lot and have neutral feelings about me, how would they just stalk you on the internet?
Well, just so everyone knows, I send copies of all of my correspondence to Caleb Newquist. Oh. So if you're trying to avoid him, you won't be able to. But you can do your best by sending me a direct message on LinkedIn. I'm Greg Kyte, CPA, on the old LinkedIn.
Oh My Fraud is written by Greg Kyte and myself. Our producer is Zach Frank. Rate, review, and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're an accountant and you would like some CPE credit for listening to this podcast, get the Earmark app.
Do it.
If you want a lot of CPE from the Earmark app, you should probably subscribe.
It's so worth it.
How much, Greg?
$160 I think right now.
Ooh.
That price changes over time. So if you go onto the app and try to subscribe, it's not.
It's the middle of summer, so it's a steal right now.
It's probably a steal.
Yeah.
But even if it's $260, it's worth it. Being able to get all you can eat CPE through podcasts. Come on. Easiest way to get your CPE ever.
Join us next time for more avarice, swindlers, and scams from stories that will make you say,
"Oh my fraud."